Hello, everyone. Welcome to the channel. Today, I am joined by the fantastic Kaden Love, which is also a phenomenal name, I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, let's go ahead. Why don't we just dive right in? And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
Yeah. So, Kaden Love is my name. I am 25, so pretty young for an author. But I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. Elegy of a Fragmented Vineyard is my first novel. I've got a novella on the way, but yeah, so I wrote that in about 2 years,
Oh, wow.
including like all the editing and things like that. But it's my first baby, and so I read and write a lot, mostly fantasy.
That's awesome. And you just had a Kickstarter, which congratulations, by the way,
Thank
that's
you.
incredible.
Yeah, it went really well.
And so why don't we go into your book? We'll just start there. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty. So can you
Mhm.
tell us what readers can expect from the Elegy of a Fragmented Vineyard?
Yeah, so a lot of it is it's a very politically based fantasy. I always tell people that like don't get worried if there isn't a ton of action in the beginning because there's action in there.
Mhm.
But a lot of that comes from me as what I like to read. I love the political machinations, the characters like Glockta or
Mm.
Tyrion, Littlefinger that just really kind of work and manipulate the system. And so that's what a lot of this is. It is a lot of the politics in the land, as well as a lot of people know the big moral dilemma of harvesting organs for magic, which is, as I guess, the most blunt way to put it.
So I've been actually dying to ask this, which is this is your first book, your debut, and you dug deep in terms of, you say political, but the ethics and the nature of it, did you go into it with that prepared as what you wanted to do, or did it develop as you were writing? Did you have an idea of the pure scope of the topic that you were exploring?
So I always tell people that I started off with the system of government in the world.
Mm,
Essentially, you have six different city states that all focus on a certain virtue, and they live that to the extreme, that being their virtue and their flaw. And I realized that I needed a point of conflict with that. And so one of the things that always makes or breaks a story for me is how the villain is portrayed.
okay.
Um, I think a lot of people love the movies like Despicable Me, where it's all for fun. But
Yeah.
Gru is a horrible villain because he wants to be a bad guy just to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
And realistically, you don't have most villains. I mean, I'm sure there are examples out there aren't bad because they want to be the baddest bad. These people they're corrupt in a way that they see what they are doing is right. Like
Mm,
Thanos. Thanos is a great example, and so I really wanted to go into this with that. I guess there are a good couple of morally gray characters in there, but most of the people are trying to do what they believe is best. And so I wanted it to be a very gray dilemma. I
mm.
wanted you to see both sides of the argument, and reading it, you're going to choose one side pretty easily. But I mean, a lot of it is just I want the readers to think. And when you need to think in books, I feel like that's when you enjoy it the most. And so I guess I went with the bold decision to do organ harvesting, which a lot of it was I was in nursing school when I wrote this, and I wanted something I wanted to use my knowledge somehow, so medically based. And that's what I went with.
Interesting. You went with organ harvesting.
Yeah, I guess so.
No, I appreciate that though, because you took a practical knowledge and skill that you have in your life and you applied it in a
Mhm.
very deep and demanding way. Yeah, because that's going to take a lot to keep track of as well, I imagine, for book two and the continuations. There's a lot of strands there.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
yes, Gru wanted
Yes.
to be
There
someone
you
of
go. Thank you
significance.
for fixing that.
No, it's all good. Gru wanted to be someone of significance. It wasn't necessarily that he wanted to be bad for its sake. And yes, you did say that, Britton.
Very good. And I guess there are a lot of villains that just want power.
Yeah.
And I guess I do have some people that want control in my book, but I wanted to have a bigger motivation. I wanted these
Mm,
people to believe that they were doing good,
right.
but they were doing it the wrong way. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting to dive into. So
mhm.
let's go back into the self-publishing because this is your debut. What's it been like for you so far?
So a lot of it, like, it hasn't honestly been really overwhelming because I did take a longer approach to it. I initially wanted to publish in October. My editor and I decided it'd be better to be pushed back into January. So this gave me a lot of time to really prepare. I One of my favorite things about the indie kind of realm of authors is everyone is so willing to help each other out.
Yes.
So I just had a ton of advice. I want to do Kickstarter, so I asked like Michael Michelle, JDL Roselle, these authors that had experience with it. And so, I mean, a lot of the difficulty was just that learning curve. You have to learn to write first to make the book,
Mm.
and then you have to learn the business side. It's a lot of that. And so, learning to market, learning to use TikTok because some people use that. So I've started to use that. And then Kickstarter definitely was something interesting. So I'm in the middle of doing all my Kickstarter fulfillment. So I'm still learning there. But I mean, you have to wait for shipments and things like that. So it's not all as rushed as I'd like it to be, even though if I did that, I'd feel very overwhelmed. So it's been good. Like I think I've done a decent way of pacing it out.
No, that's great. In terms of looking to the future, is there anything you might do differently for the next book?
Um yeah, I do think I do want to do a Kickstarter. I need to figure and now I'll have a better understanding of when my book will be ready for publishing. That was a big like the first draft of Elegy was so much worse than it is now. And I feel like a lot of authors have that experience. Um, but I gauging that, I do want to have a Kickstarter run a bit longer. I think I'd love to do one for book two.
Mm,
Um, Mostly I did it because I just thought it was a good way to catch attention. And
right.
most of the funding from because some people might know my wife did my cover art, Sarah Chorn did my editing because I won the Indie Fantasy Fund. So
Yes.
I'm hoping for this one rather than paying for book one to pay for the editing for book two. And if we do things good enough, I'd love to just kind of turn the reward. Like I'd love to have a big Kickstarter, not for me personally, but to have cooler rewards. Like this one, I had stickers, bookmarks, simple things, but I'd love to do bigger things if possible.
Oh, interesting. Anything that you have in mind that you can share, or are we keeping it on the down low?
I'd love to do like 3D printed minis. I have a couple of friends that can help me with that. And so I think it'd be I thought about it for book one, but I thought for book two it'd be much cooler because people already know some of the characters.
Mm.
And then just giving my wife more time to do some full art prints. There are two in Elegy. So I think just having more stuff like that.
I love it. And I love that your wife did the cover art. That makes it so much more personal.
Hmm.
And yes, we do have some fantastic folks, speaking of the community, here in the chat. Lots of familiar faces.
Good to see everyone.
And there's Ed. You said you'd be here, so I'm happy to see you. So let's go into the Kickstarter a little bit because you said you got some advice. You kind of went through the planning for that. Is there anything from the first Kickstarter that really stood out to you? Because you said there was learning curves to it. So was there anything that really stood out that you might give advice to another author?
Um, yeah, I think for people just knowing how you're going to do all of distribution, I eventually figured out that I wanted to do for like international signed copies. send out book labels just because shipping is
Mm.
so expensive. And one thing with Kickstarters that they're very renowned for is it takes a long time. I also like board games.
Oh,
And
nice.
if you back a board game Kickstarter, like my dad did the one for The Witcher, and he got it like 2 or 3 years after he backed it. And just seeing things like that, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to get this to people as soon as possible. Um, so I think a lot of it is just like nailing down how you're going to do everything before you do it,
Mm.
so that you know how to get it out there. And that's like I said, one of the reasons that I'm doing those book plates is that now I can order those and send them right away rather than having come here and there, make all the extra packaging and such. And just one of the things that I know that I appreciate as a Kickstarter backer is
Mm.
frequent updates. And that doesn't mean like you need to like say every week what's going on or every day, but whenever there's something significant, just to know that it's in the process. Because like Zach Argyle's Threadlight Omnibus, I knew where we were at every point of the way.
Yeah.
And when, it was initially like, oh, okay, you'll get this in December, I got it in February, but that was no problem to me because I knew, okay, we had a couple delays here, things like that. And just being very transparent with the
Mm.
people, because these are people that are pledging because they believe in you and what you're doing. And
Mhm.
just being a good friend, I think is part of it, being clear on what's going on so that people don't get frustrated if, someone that ordered a book on Amazon gets theirs first.
Right. No, I think that's a great piece of advice. I know for myself and my own, because I got the it's over there and over here, but the Threadlight Omnibus. And
Hmm.
so far I've gotten two books from Kickstarters that I've backed, and being international, unfortunately both arrived damaged.
Oh.
And it was just a matter of packaging issues. So they were
Hmm.
just packaged with one thin layer of paper, and of course, they got jostled around and they got dented, and one had a issue with the spine. So, as an international customer, shall I say, I really appreciate the attention and the updates. And
Hmm.
I know that in terms of customer service, it's important to think like the customer.
Hmm.
What will they expect? What would you want? And that's very much appreciated as a customer.
Yeah. And like I guess up front with people that are even considering doing Kickstarters, if they
Mm.
haven't done it yet, just to back Kickstarters to know,
Mm.
first of all, how the system works,
Yeah.
just see what people do that is successful for them. And as a project creator, people can see if you back projects. And I don't know the statistics and everything on it, but people just tell me, if you have more projects back, people see that you're more willing to contribute to things and they're more willing to back you.
And two, if people, especially in terms of books, if people are looking to try Kickstarter for the first time, oftentimes there are levels within backing a project that are just bookmarks, that are digital copies of the book. So if you're worried about the shipping part, or you can't afford the shipping aspect because you're international, those are also great options as well.
Hmm.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to do a check in with the chat. If anyone has any questions for Kaden, put them in the chat and we will get to them. While they are doing that, though, we're going to keep going. So, in terms of your reading, what are you reading right now?
So I listen to audiobooks while I run. I'm a long distance runner, so that's where I do most of my reading. But I do prefer print by far, and I do try to juggle ebooks. So mostly what I'm reading now is Malazan, and then I'm reading One Piece on my phone digitally.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
so like two very big long series, and I'm currently in Memories of Ice, book 3 in Malazan, and really, really like it. But it's one that, like I've got to give a lot of attention, and even then,
Mhm.
I usually only get like 100 pages a week just with my schedule.
It's a lot to process, it's a lot to go through, and it's not the kind of series you want to just binge, if
No.
that makes sense. I got up to House of Chains. I finished House of Chains, and I need to dive back into the series. But
Hmm.
when you do finish it, I am curious where you stand with Memories of Ice, because so far from feedback I've heard from readers is either they Memories of Ice is their favorite or one of their least favorites.
Hmm.
So I'm
Really
curious.
interesting. Yeah, like so far for me, I just reached page 300 today, and this is the one where it's like the series is really clicking with me. And like I'm not gonna say it's not my favorite series yet, but I can definitely see if I really get that sucked in, I can see how why people say it's their favorite.
Nice.
Because like I said, I love things that make me think,
Mhm.
and um this one definitely does that. And I just love the world building, the philosophy, the like it's just such a thick book.
It is, yeah. It's, it'll be interesting to see, what you think of it. I am very curious.
Hmm.
I the way it was pitched to me was, and I'm not quoting this, this is how my brain interpreted You Should Read Malazan, which was, "This is an amazing series, you will love it on reread, but you have to read the first 20,000 pages and then read it again to get
Yeah.
it." That was kind of the pitch I was given.
Yeah, I know someone like told me that just like they're like when you read um Gardens of the Moon the first time, it's like a kick in the knee, whereas like the second time it's just pure bliss. And so, and I'm not a big rereader. Like the only series that I've reread so far have been like I honestly I think I've read like the first Harry Potter book like 50 times just because I read a bunch as a kid. But
Yeah,
Mistborn and then the original trilogy of Red Rising. Um
yeah,
I do want to reread Threadlight, but like this one, it's like, okay, I think I could do it. So um but it is nice because this is one that I wouldn't do on audiobook, even though I know some people like it, just because I definitely need to if I take a day away from it, it's like, wow, that's a lot. But if I take, just a while away from it, I need to go and reread like the previous page and then be like, okay, I got it now.
yeah. And, Breton here has a question, and very valid.
Hmm.
How do you write when you're a nurse? Where do you
Yeah.
find the time?
So my schedule is I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So Wednesdays and Saturdays are writing days. Even though things are bound to come up, those are the days I dedicate to complete writing. But I still try to hit 1,000 words a day. So a lot of that is I take public transportation, and Ed Greaves there, he convinced me to start writing on my phone a lot, which
Oh,
um,
nice.
during NaNoWriMo in November, that's when I really got into it because I was like, okay, there's no way I can get 50,000 words in a month if I don't write at work or like going to and from it. So usually I can get like in the time before work or coming home from work on the train, I can get like around 500 words. And then I'll get back home and finish it then. And of course, there are days where I just get home, nothing works out. And so just the next day I try to get more. But most of it, like I try to get phone writing in. I'm a mix of like plotting and pantsing where I'll have the
Nice.
next couple chapters kind of skeleton lined out. Um, but like if there's a chapter that really needs to like sit down and be thought about, I'll definitely do that home on the computer. But that's how it works.
Nice. And do you ever, well, I'm sure everyone kind of goes through this, but do you get days where it's a little harder to reach that word count goal? How do you handle that?
Yeah, like there are days where, like I said, where it just doesn't happen. Like I try to get something in every day, but I try to keep that mentality where I don't make myself feel guilty if I don't. It's just kind of I have that goal of 1,000. So if it's like end of the day, I have like an hour and a half before I go to bed. I'm not doing anything rather than just like sitting and doing something useless. I can just kind of push myself through a half hour of writing and get a couple words in. Um, there are days where nothing happens, but there are days where I get home and I haven't done anything
Hmm.
writing wise in the day, and I'll just kind of force myself to sit down. And I think a lot of it comes just from running mentality, where I run every day except for Sundays, and people are like, "How do you do that?" And it's like I wake up and don't give myself a choice. I just force myself to do it and do the same thing with writing.
It's what's the word I'm looking for? Willpower.
Yes, very, yeah, exactly.
Willpower. You have the strength with you. We've got Derek in here as well, and a few others. Welcome. It is
Oh, thank
fantastic to see
you.
you all. Yes. See, that's the feeling many people get is reading the first 3 Malazan books, and then, yeah, I find again, I've seen, like, 2 different reactions, which is one is just like, "Nope, not for me," and, "Oh my god, this is yes. I am all in." And we have a question here from Tim. You talked about learning about marketing and the business side of the author thing, and you're everywhere, nailing it even before you were published. Where did you learn and look for info?
I attribute most of that to, like if people ask how to network or like market, is just be a friend to people. So what I started out with, I first talked to Keon Arladon that wrote 11th Cycle, and he
Mm,
sat down with me on Zoom, just talked for like 2 hours, telling me like the lowdown on how to publish indie.
that's
And then,
amazing.
yeah, and he linked me to a couple Discords, which I think were a good start, but most of my mingling has been on Twitter, which I got into, a little less than a year ago, maybe. And honestly, there, I tried to talk about books, I hype books, and that's the thing that I think the easiest thing you can do is read an indie book and just talk about how much you love it on there. And like I think that's one of the reasons I got such a good relationship with Zach Argyle, because I love Threadlight and I just
Mhm.
wouldn't stop talking about it. And like even books, even if you haven't gotten to them, like Sons of Darkness by Gaurav Mohanty, before it even came out, I was in love with the idea. It's, complex Indian grimdark. And I
Mm.
thought the cover was awesome. So I was sharing on Instagram. And then when I got on Twitter there, and I eventually got the book and I loved it. And so I talked about it there. And I think that is the easiest way. It's just to talk about books. And we are all aware that there's book drama out there. So just be something positive. And, like when you're that author and someone just shares your post or things like that, then you know how much people appreciate when you do the same. And a lot of it, like I think when I first really got a lot of attention, I tribute to FanFi Addict that did my cover reveal. And partially it was my mistake because I did the cover reveal in June, which, a lot of people like do a couple months before, but that honestly really worked out for me because I wanted to publish sooner. But like I said, I published in January. So just being out there, getting your face out there and being positive, I think that's the best way to do it.
I love that you say you just started by basically yelling into the the
Yeah.
internet about everything you love, 'cause it's really booktube, that's all we do. We're just
hmm
yelling about books we love and why we love them. So, at what point are you starting your own YouTube channel?
I've thought about it so much. And like I always love to put that like the play button up there, which isn't mine. My wife, she's an artist and has a YouTube channel that she's gotten with that. So
Good
she's
on her.
helped, like she's talked to me a bunch about things. And I've even like I've recently gotten her into fantasy. So we've like considered doing it. But that's what I think. Like I love booktube too. And even though I'm not
Yeah.
a booktuber, I love just like watching videos and shouting them out. And like Library of a Viking was one of those first booktubers that I built a good relationship with.
Yeah.
Um, and I offered him an arc, and just out of just kindness, and he read it. He was one of the, like I think he read it before release, and I got his blurb on the book. And
Yeah.
so I have some people asking, how'd you do that? How'd you get like this thing like that? I just appreciated people's content, shared it, and they returned the favor.
Just being a good human. That's all it is, comes
Exactly
down
it.
to. So let's dive back into your writing and your storytelling because I did read the first 10%, I think,
Mhm.
and because you and I talked about this before, I was very anxious about the opening chapter, It was a little difficult for me to get through,
Hmm.
but it was far more detailed, like in depth than I was expecting.
Hmm.
And I know I'm going to need to be in a very specific mindset to keep track because there's already so many characters, so many relations, so many
Uh-huh.
cultures. And you talked about getting some of your inspiration from big names like George R. R. Martin, Brandon Sanderson, Pierce Brown. Was that an aspect of what inspired you? Was the depth of the world, the characters, or was it more the story? Really, what drew you from those authors and their stories to inspire this one?
Yeah. And I feel like it's very default to say that Brandon Sanderson was my biggest inspiration, but my claim to that is, he's a Utah writer. And so
Mm,
I grew up, like when I say grew up, I in high school, Mistborn was like decently well known around here, but it was still kind of like Brandon Sanderson, local author, even though he's like published by a big company, people just knew who he was.
right.
Um, and so kind of following to see his big success was so cool. And when I really, really started writing, was when so in high school, I read the first two Stormlight books. And then years later, when Oathbringer and Rhythm of War came out, I listened to those on audiobooks. So I tried to get into Oathbringer a bunch, but it'd been years since I'd read the last one. And so I did the whole like go through every chapter summary. And so I just realized, like, best way I'm going to do this is through doing audiobook. So I listened to the audiobook of Rhythm War and Oathbringer while I was running, and that just really put me, like, throughout my life I've gone in and out of fantasy, just like big reading moves, and those really set me in it.
Okay.
And so I guess the big thing to say from that is I watched his lectures, of course, and I just really admire the world building in there. Um,
Mm,
Mistborn still remains my favorite series just
mm,
because of kind of the foundation it gave me. But just looking in, like, how he has such detailed glossaries, and I remember just like, you can get so lost looking on the wikis about the wonderful worlds that he's built.
yes.
And I thought it was just such rich culture. And don't get me wrong, like Game of Thrones is pretty bare bones, like medieval warfare and politics, dragons. Like there's a couple things that he does, but a lot of it is just based on the people
Mm,
in like a medieval setting. But Brandon Sanderson did his so uniquely, and I wanted to do something like that. So that
mm,
got me writing. And Pierce Brown has been a really big inspiration character wise. And I am such a sucker for twists.
mm.
So, like, surprising things, if a book surprises me and it's a horrible book, it's still going to get a couple stars from me. Um, and just like, I don't know, it gives me plus 10. Like, one of my favorite shows is The Twilight Zone. Like, you can have a lame story for like 30 minutes and it gives you a huge twist at the end. You're just like, oh, that was
Yes.
awesome. And so I think that he does shock value really well, but
Mm,
where it's not like just like killing characters for the sake of killing characters, but he'll
yeah.
do make some big twists, some big connection. And that lastly, it's to George R. R. Martin, who just I love from the political fantasy. You have warfare in
Mm,
there, you have monsters, creatures, the things that you want in fantasy, but essentially is that is just politics in a medieval era with a fantasy setting. And I loved just putting it in there. It's about the people and their interactions with each other.
I love it. And yes, I completely agree with the Mistborn. That was the series that re-sparked my passion for fantasy books.
Hmm.
So I definitely understand that and the depth that he went into with those glossaries and the details and stuff.
Hmm.
And Ed says here, I'm still waiting for him to respond to your invitation to meet up for coffee. If he doesn't, and I ever meet him, I'll tell him he's a nerd.
Oh, I know. One of these days, it's gonna happen somehow.
So, uh, like you said, you went into some complex topics. Um, in terms of going in, because you've got quite the scope set up. How many books are you planning for the series?
This is gonna be a trilogy. with
Okay.
novellas in between. So Ryan Cahill thing.
Mm,
Um, book two is probably going to be twice as long. Third book, I don't know. Just because
mm,
book two has more point of views. And then, like I said, I novella one is coming out. That's a prequel. Then I want one that takes place in between two. Ideally, I write these while the book is in beta read phase because I can't
mm.
really do much there. And then I'd like one between books two and three, and then kind of like a final epilogue. Um, and we'll see where I feel at that point. Like I do have an end goal for this series where it ends up, but if I want to revisit the world,
Mm.
maybe do something a little later, kind of how Joe Abercrombie did with Age of Madness. Like
Yeah.
I'm open to doing standalone things, and that's kind of what the novellas are going to be, just standalone adventures.
Okay.
Um, but I do have other projects that I'm working on, so it's like priority number one, finish this series.
Mm.
But then I have some other things that I want to do.
So, in terms of the novellas, you said they're standalones. Are they following a character that we see in the main trilogy?
Yeah, so the first book is, I mean, the first novella follows a character that you don't meet until halfway through Elegy. If anyone's read it, Runeth is his name. He's a guy
Okay.
that can kind of control beasts. And so I use him as a way to introduce you to the world where this has happened. The novella happens 4 years before the book, 1 year after people have started grafting these organs into people or powers. And he is kind of oblivious to how it's all working out. So you get to see it
Mm.
kind of connect through his eyes. And so these kind of people like him, they're called beastlings. They can communicate with animals and monsters alike. And so that is the base of book one. Runeth becomes a staple character in the series. But book two, I don't really plan on connecting it with any main characters. I mean, novella two. But I want to do it. It's going to be another beastling, someone like Runeth, but I want it to be a female perspective, and I want it to be kind of a clash between um, Pokemon and The Witcher, where I want her to have like a specific animal kind of companion that they go through where people battle them and are searching out certain ones. Just because I Pokemon is one of my favorite things, and I love just putting things I love into my work.
I mean, I won't complain. I grew up with Pokemon. I love
Yeah.
it. And so I want to talk about your characters a little bit
Mhm.
because you have, like you said, you have characters on opposite ends, opposite viewpoints, and they fully believe in what they're doing. In terms of creating those characters, what was that process like for you?
Um, it a lot of it was exploring myself and people that I know. So Fenmir, well, the one that most people that you meet right off the bat, I think that a lot of people will view this book as mostly his story, even though the
Mm.
point of views are all balanced. I really enjoyed writing him,
Okay.
and but he was probably my least favorite out of the three because I just didn't connect with him as well. He is the one that has more come from people I know in my life, whereas Aerie, the noble woman who's on the complete opposite side of Fenmir,
Mm.
a lot of her experiences are me exploring my flaws of perfectionism, which
Interesting.
she is the complete like she's from a a group of people that they focus on exact obedience, perfection, and
Mm.
she's taken that to an extreme, which you later learn why she is that way. And I feel like she's the best fleshed out character arc in there because Fenmir has his rises and falls. Yetrick, the other character, definitely has his way, but hers is a very distinct line
Mm.
that is I kind of designed her that I want you to hate her when you meet her and leave the book loving her, which a lot
Mm.
of people have had that reaction to her.
Interesting.
And I don't know, I just felt like her story really resonated as a one that I did well. It's like a piece of art that I can look back on and feel satisfied with.
Yeah.
Um, and she is a character that I wrote a backstory for in it that you kind of like. I'm not the biggest fan of flashbacks, but it was one that I felt needed to be done to give her character justice. And Like if anyone wants to reach out to me and talk about it, they can, but like I am not going to give any spoilers,
Of
but
course.
I have a really like deep connection to her story there. It was a lot of what was going on in mine and my wife's life and kind of the difficulties that we were facing. And
Mm,
it was just a way that I could kind of rant in
mm,
story form. So there's definitely a lot of emotion going into her. And then Yetrick, the third character, is the one that I think I enjoy the most because he's me. Um,
mm,
it's not exactly me when I say that, but like he is someone that I've put so many things about me. If you learn about Yetrick, you'll know a lot about me personally because I made him OCD. I'm very OCD. He he's pretty passive in a lot of things. Like I always tell people, we have these characters that one is for the side, one's for another. Yetrick is for the harvesting, but he does it just kind of because it's what he's told. He's very passive and he's just
right.
trying to do what's best. Where you can look at Aerie and be mad at what she's doing.
Mm,
Yetrick is just trying to do its best and he's there. And I'm a very passive person. I don't like conflict,
yeah.
and that's what he does. So I think that it was super fun writing those two particularly, and then book two gets even more exciting because I feel like I really get to just have fun with different characters.
Oh,
You know,
nice.
Yetrick and Aerie are very different, even though both of them have like traits from me in them.
Mm.
Um, I think it's just fun to explore characters as I grow as a writer.
That's the way you do it, right?
Hmm.
You grow, you change, you apply it. And, interesting that it's Fenrir, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, that one was he connects with, people, with readers, but
Hmm.
you struggled with him, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
And, just opening again to the chat, if you have questions, pop them in, we will cover them. And in terms of let's actually jump into TikTok a little bit because I'm a grandma when it comes to TikTok, and I swore off it for a long time. I
Hmm.
finally decided to dip my toes in, and I was really surprised at the differences in views, reactions to the exact same content just on different platforms.
Yes.
Between YouTube and TikTok, the numbers are completely different. So I'd love to hear how it's been going for you on TikTok. What are some tricks that maybe you've learned and used, and any tips you have for other authors? Because I've seen so many authors on TikTok too.
Yeah. So, funny enough, yeah, I feel the same way about TikTok. Like you said initially, my experience to TikTok before TikTok was Instagram Reels because I swore off TikTok because I thought it was stupid. And to be fair, I don't like really like the only time I really look at TikTok is when I am looking for ideas. So
Right.
I don't know. Like I'm not here to bag on anyone that uses TikTok. It's just I don't know. A lot of the content there doesn't really resonate with me as much. And
I
when I
get
would
that.
watch reels, it's only for entertainment, funny things that I'd send back and forth to my family.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of the things that TikTok does well is just like quick attention grabbers. Honestly, all of my experience that I have learned from it has been talking with CSD Monty, author of Stone Sky,
Yes.
because and he's an awesome guy. He's become a good friend of mine. But like our initial interaction was me asking just for advice on it. He sat down with me, had like a long conversation on what to do, and a lot of it is just making a ton of content.
Mm.
The schedule that I follow is for my time here in Utah. I post 3 videos a day. I do 10:30 a.m., 3:30 p.m., and 7 p.m.
Wow.
And I don't know, depending on time zones, how it works for people, it might be different. But um, CapCut, those like
Yes.
simple memes are a really easy option when you're on the go. But um, I personally, my favorite ones that I like are just ones more where it feels just like it feels more like booktube stuff. That's
Yeah.
I love booktube so much more. And honestly, if I had more time and talent, I'd do that more because I feel like it's more genuine, whereas TikTok doesn't seem as real, a lot of it. And like I'm
Mm.
completely a part of that. I'll be like, 3 series that you need to read right now, like just in a couple seconds, throwing that out there. But like I said, you need to just be frequently on there. So what I do is um Wednesdays and Thursdays, my days off of work. I mean Wednesdays and Saturdays, I'll record just a bunch in the morning when like the daylight is right in my office.
Mm.
Um, and throughout the week, I'll just be like jotting down ideas, and a lot of it will be um the ones that really work for me is I'll have a stack of 3 books, hold like the camera just silent for like 3 seconds, and I'll just have like background music playing through the app. And it will be like fantasy books for fans of this, or
Mm.
books that feel like dreams, books that are this.
Rapid
And they're
fire
very,
recommendations.
yeah, and like people, if they stumble across it, they don't need to be like fans of your channel. They just see, oh, like, might as well pay a couple seconds just to add things. Cause I think a lot of people there are looking for recommendations. They're going and
Mm.
looking for ideas on books. So those really do well with me. Um, then like I've been told by people, just you need to make sure that that hook is really good. So initially
Mm.
I'd be like, hey, fantasy book talk, which Zach CS Diamani told me that he's like, just cut that out. Like you need to just like go right into it. Just be
Yeah.
like this, this. So I think the best way is just to get really good hooks, post frequently, and I'll vary between, I'll have like those book recommendations are like 15 seconds each. And then I'll do like minute long ones where I'll talk
Mm.
about like, oh, here's my favorite this series, or I'll do like 60-second book reviews. So the way that I think the surefire ways is just you have to have a strict schedule for posting. And from what I've been promised, and I hope fulfills, comes out later, is that just as you post frequently, eventually you'll get to the point where you don't need to do that often. And I know like
Right.
big book talkers don't need to, but it's really you're at the mercy of the algorithm. And
Mhm.
so, I just keep posting. And right now I think I hit like 1,100 followers today.
Nice, congrats.
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm at the point where I have like I can put a link in my bio. But it's honestly just doing the same thing over and over again. And I guess if there are authors looking to, or just anyone looking to start a TikTok for the book community, what I was told to do, like if you start or if you're trying to get something going, go, before even posting for 2 weeks, just only watch book talk. Like if you see something
Mhm.
on TikTok that is for books, just sit there and watch it. But if you see something that's not for books, swipe away. You don't want the algorithm to know
Right.
that you're in a, that you want it to tell, you want it to know that you are on book content so that when you post, it goes to those people. And so for those like 2 weeks, I would just like watch those videos, or I'd search like epic fantasy, fantasy book talk, indie fantasy, um, and just trying to train the algorithm. And then I'll use hashtags right now. Whereas I recognize that my book is complex. I wrote it to tailor to a Sanderson audience. So I'll do like, hashtag Cosmere, hashtag Stormlight Archive, hashtag Malzahn.
Right.
Um, so I guess my final point is just knowing the niche that you want to work into. I can make a post about romantasy, or like do hashtag Fourth Wing, but those are books that I read.
Right.
And I might gain a follower, but the people that'll continually watch and follow me are the people that are going to watch what I'm posting about. So finding a niche, being
Absolutely.
constant, that's all I can offer.
So, as someone who records videos and shorts, that is a lot of content to produce. I know you say they're only a few seconds, but that's
Yes.
a lot of time because there's editing behind the scenes, there's uploading and making sure you're consistent. Have you
Mhm.
run into burnout? Have you run into a point where you need a break from it or you struggle to keep making content? And if you do, how do you handle it?
A lot of it is that I recognize that a lot of my stuff isn't good, and I'm pretty impulsive by the point where I I really don't. like if I try to do my things in one take. Um,
Mm.
but I'll do the, like I'll hold the book, pause it, then go again. So I don't do a ton of editing.
Okay.
Um, what I try to do is just get good lighting. I'll put the captions on and then throw like I'll just look to a song that like fits it, turn it on really low volume, have my original volume, like the voice up. So I do very minimal editing.
Nice.
Um, and so that's the thing that I try to balance it out where if I have a video where I'm like, okay, I put a good amount of effort into this, some I will. I'll do the other ones like a cap cut or something like those book things that where I hold up three recommendations. It will literally be me, like I'll sit down, have my tripod set up, and I'll be like, okay, what does this book evoke feelings of? Okay, this one is has twists. So I'll
Mm.
grab three books that have good twists, post that, I'll hold it, do it, and then I'll just add it to the drafts. Um,
Okay.
so I think that is a lot of mine is just doing my videos aren't the best quality, but then I noticed that, there are some people that do amazing content on there, but there are a lot of TikTokers that have like 50,000 followers and don't really like they're just sitting in their car recording. And so the
Yeah.
only things that I really try to do is like if I were to record now, the lighting isn't great. So I try to do maybe like 10 a.m. I do it on a tripod because my hand's a little shaky. And then just like if I stumble too much when I'm speaking or I ramble on it doesn't make sense, I'll reshoot it. But a lot of it is like I don't do a ton of planning. It's like a sentence I wrote down earlier. I'll be like, okay, my Cosmere reading order. I go grab a couple books and I'll be like, I started with this one, then I read this one, then I read this one. I don't know if it's great, but this is what I like. And so just trying to be very like blunt, I guess.
To the point, trim the fat, basically, keep it
Yeah,
simple and keep it fast paced. And I I want to say too, your videos are good quality. Don't
thanks.
worry about that.
Appreciate
Like
it.
you said, lighting is so important. I do my unboxings. I mainly try and do them in natural light for the same reason.
Hmm.
The lighting setup I have here, it's poor quality in terms of seeing how beautiful those books are. You wanna
Hmm.
show them off. You want it to your backgrounds to look good, right? But yes,
Yeah.
you definitely got that, so I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah, and so I guess it is a lot of the content you're looking for. My videos, like I said, are very minimalistic, but like if you're trying to go for something higher quality, I completely understand. It is so hard to push out that much content. My
Mm,
wife makes reels to like promote her art, and that does a lot of success on Instagram. But she'll maybe do like one a week, one or two a week, because she puts like an hour into making one.
yeah,
And that's the thing that if you're going to try to be consistent, I would just say like try to do quick things or have, I don't know. Yeah. Just have ways where you can make quick content because that's what TikTok is. It is
yeah.
people want quick, immediate satisfaction and over like distinct quality. I'm not saying, like shoot through a potato lens that's just garbage, but you got to find that nice balance between quality and convenience for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing all that.
Yeah.
I
Hope
know
it
it
helped.
absolutely, and any kind of sharing of experience, right? It helps.
Hmm.
You always learn something new, and I always appreciate hearing it. So I'm going to open again to the chat. If you have questions, pop them in. And in the meantime, I would love to know, aside from everything that we've already talked about with your writing and future plans, is there any other kind of story, world, or themes that you would love to explore?
Hmm. So I've just been in a big mood of like dark fantasy.
Ooh,
So like Dark Souls is what I've been playing a lot now.
yes.
I haven't read Berserk and I don't really plan on just because certain content in it, but I love the idea of just like that, like big monsters. And I love like Kaladin. Kaladin's a great character idea of
Yes.
these characters that have been through so much but persevere. Like Darrow resonated with me. I know there's a lot of characters like that, and Malazan. And so that's kind of what I'm working on with the next story is just a tortured hero that I put a lot of emotion in. And that being said, a single perspective story. Epic fantasies are my favorite, but I do love where, if you take a book like Elegy, you could say that this is three short stories that interconnect, that are actually like pretty short. Whereas
Mm.
the other book that I want to go into, I want it to be single perspective so I can get a long character story. Um, and so that's just been a very like mood writing. And so I'll add to that story every now and then just as a side project. But I do want to write some science fiction because I do love science fiction, but at the same time, like I feel it's funny to say, but I feel like I'm not smart enough to. Um,
I know what you mean.
yeah, like because there are books that like Dune. I think Dune is a very smart book, but at the same
Mm.
time, like it's not as much of like real world content. It's very much fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah.
Whereas like um Sun Eater is a series that I'm reading right now. Just the like the space science, the science of time, and all those things. Just like just thinking about all the research that has to go into that is a little overwhelming.
Right.
Um, and so that is the thing that's been kind of pushing me back. So I think it'd be fun to do something like that or something kind of like cyberpunkish
Oh,
that's
neat.
that's modern but different in a sense. And so those are the two things, my two side projects that I do want to do is like a darker character focused fantasy, more emotional, with a bit of romance in there, which I a lot of that I'm doing because that's what my wife likes to read a lot, and I think doing a not complete romantasy but a dark romance would be fun.
Right.
And then the other one is like kind of a cyberpunk.
Very nice. So lots of ideas. You have
Yeah.
lots of things you want to explore.
Mhm.
So lucky for all of us readers that we get lots of books to read from you.
Yeah, that's the hope.
So, and Derek says sci-fi or sci-fantasy can be fun in between too.
For
Yeah.
sure.
And so I am curious because you've read quite a bit, and we'll wrap up soon. So if anyone has those questions, pop them in. But I would love to know if you could recommend, let's say, 3 books that people should read if they're looking to get
Hmm.
into fantasy. What would be your top recommendations?
Okay, we're gonna step aside from Sanderson here because I feel like that is the easiest one to go to.
Go to
Um,
Zach Argyle instead.
yes, that is actually my first recommendation.
Yep.
I think that Threadlight is a perfect entrance into fantasy because you have like especially that omnibus, like when people see that is 3 books.
Yeah.
um I listened to the series on audiobook originally and went through it in a week. Like I
Yeah.
loved it so much. And one of the things that I think that book does that's very powerful is it opens people's eyes up to independently published fantasy. Like this,
Mm.
it is so well done and it is indie fantasy. So I think
Yeah.
that people, if they can get that, like outside of the indie world, there is that stigma that they might not be as good, but I think that will shatter people's expectations. Um, Other books for getting into fantasy, I've got to take a look
By all
over
means.
my shoulder.
I'm the same.
Yeah, I I think that I'm gonna try to like veer away from like because I think that First Law is a great series for people that love Game of Thrones. We'll just go in with that one, even though people recommend a lot.
For sure.
A lot of people are very familiar with Game of Thrones because they've watched the show and maybe they don't want to read the books because they've seen it. I think that is a great alternative to it because it has that dark fantasy that people are looking for, but it is a brilliant work of character. It's just the way that he does things, and especially you go the 2 trilogies and the in between, there's so much to offer, and you get to see these characters grow. And I think it's just been one of the most entertaining reads
Mm,
for me, and I think it's a great audiobook series. If people are looking for audiobooks,
okay.
the way that the narrator does it, Stephen Pacey is just a wonderful actor in the way that he does things. Um, and then lastly, for people wanting a big fantasy that really makes them think but is not too difficult, Ken Liu's Dandelion Dynasty
Yes.
is one of my favorite series. It's not your typical like 10-book series. It's not just a trilogy. They're long, but you follow mostly a family just kind of as they age and you get to see the kids grow up. And it was just such, by the time I finished it, it was such a big long adventure and I had so much fun with it.
Hmm.
It doesn't get you all caught up, kind of like how the first law does. They don't get you too caught up in the world building, whereas it's more so on the people.
Yes.
And I think it kind of breaks those boundaries, Dandelion Dynasty, of just the typical European fantasy, which we're all used to, we love. And this one was just, it's definitely Asian inspired, and people have like looked into it. It's very inspired of like early American history, which is kind of
Yeah.
interesting. So it's just, it's something different that people can
Mm.
see that fantasy is more than swords and dragons, while those are aplenty, that there are some great things that you can learn there while doing it.
Oh, I love it. And I'm actually going to add on to that for the Dandelion Dynasty because I did start that and I need to come back to it. I would say if anyone is going to pick that up, really go into it with an open mind as well. And if you are struggling with it, I struggled with getting into it. I had to reread the first 10% twice because I was getting so lost. Because, like you said, there's a lot of
Oh
people,
yeah.
it focuses on them. And in order to, keep track of everyone, I went back and I reread it. And it wasn't until 50% into the book that I went, okay, I get it now.
100%.
I get it. So, if you are looking to get into that series and that story, definitely give it some time if you're struggling.
Hmm. And I think that's like a perfect lesson for people too, that when, if they choose to get into this series and they haven't read fantasy a lot, knowing that going back for a bit is okay. Like you don't have
Mhm.
to keep pushing because you don't understand. Feel free to like, especially Malazan. That's by far not one for beginning fantasy readers, but you appreciate it so much more when you can take time to go back, look at the chapter you read, and you're like, okay, I see things piecing together more. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah,
I mean, Malazan throws curveballs like it's just they're free. Like, here you go.
oh yeah,
All right. Well, I will put it to the chat once more. Questions, pop them in. And on a final note, for anyone watching, go check out The Elegy of a Vineyard by Kaden Love, debut author. Lots of incredible stories to look forward to, as well as all the links will be in the description below. Everyone watching, thank you so much for being here with us, for diving into these questions and sharing your experiences as well. Kaden, thank you so much too for
thank
being
you.
here. I
I
appreciate your
appreciate it.
time. Absolutely. And any final words, any words of wisdom you might like to share as a sign off?
Read books. They make you smart and they're fun.
That's the best way to sign off.
Yeah. Yeah. Just I appreciate all the support anyone's given me. It means so much to me.
Absolutely. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and take care of yourselves.